This segment is brought to you in part by the Canadian Historical Arms Society, owners of the Genesee Range, the premier recreational sport and training facility in Western Canada. See us online at historical-arms.com.
The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Quiet Professional. Today we are going to be talking about a harrowing personal account of military service and being taken prisoner. I'm joined by my co-host, John Simpson. He is a veteran of the U.S. Army with over 40 years of practical experience. He's an instructor with Snipercraft Incorporated and a research historian. And he's also authored several books on the fundamentals and advanced tactics of marksmanship and sniper skills. I will have the links for those up in the episode description, so make sure you check those out. And our guest today is Ken Kraus, who was a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps Marine Security Guard Battalion. We are going to talk about his story at a time when he had been reassigned from his main duty station in the U.S. Embassy in Nicosia, Cyprus, to the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, Iran in 1979. The American Embassy in Iran came under siege by terrorists on February 14th of 1979, Valentine's Day. On that day, Ken's entire life and commitment to service were left to miracles that transpired during the attack, abduction, torture, release, and debrief as he made his way home. The book is called Ken Kraus, A Marine Endures Hell, the first Marine held hostage in Iran during the Iranian hostage crisis of 1979. So welcome to you both.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, John.
Good to be back.
Yeah, your story doesn't end there, Ken. Obviously, you're with us here today, and you've done a lot of other things since the military. You were also with the U.S. Department of Energy as a SWAT officer, and you ultimately retired as a police officer and forensic detective. That was with the Roswell Police Department?
That's correct, sir.
So yeah, as I was saying in the intro, you've got a book on this. I'll put the links for that up in the episode description.
Put that there.
Absolutely everybody. Yeah, we got it there in the picture there. I will make sure we got links up for that. Everybody absolutely needs to read this, and it is a no-holds-barred version of what goes on when you're held prisoner. I make that distinction because you do that in the book too. You were not hostage because there was no asking for anything for you. You were a prisoner, and that was it.
Correct.
So I want to start just by talking about you a little bit, just before the military service, and kind of get a picture of it throughout the book. And the way the book is written, it talks about you before military service, but it's toward the end of the book. But I'd like to start with that here, if we can.
Sure.
You seem like a real go-getter, a hard charger, and very direct in life. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before military service, and just about your character, your personality development, and what drove you to military service?
Well, simply, I'm glad that it's been about 40 years and we could talk about it because the statutes of limitations have run on almost any felony that I could be accused of. But my background is born and raised in New Jersey, and the family that I was in, I had a great family. My dad was a veteran of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Also with his brothers, my uncles. So they were, shall we say, mom and dad were both immigrants from other countries. Mom came from Ireland and dad came from Germany. And I guess they met up in New Jersey somewhere. And then, they started a family shortly after World War II. I had a background in a Catholic school, parochial school. I guess I was lucky there because back in the 60s, it was very good, very good elementary education. Excuse me. And then I had my dad passed away from cancer when I was about 14 years old, and I had the other siblings I had were all sisters. I didn't have any brothers. So growing up in and around the area in South Jersey, um, we were right across the river from Philadelphia. Long story short is that it looked like troubled times for me as a kid, growing up fighting and getting around gangs and things like that. So my mom shipped me off to military academy, which back in its days people thought was kind of a punishment. But the military academy went to Valley Forge Military Academy. It's in Wayne, Pennsylvania. Very prestigious military academy. You can't get in there if you don't have good grades, money, a scholarship like I got for wrestling. If you look at that back in the movie, they shot the movie Taps
Okay.
with George C. Scott, I believe Tim Sutton, and it was
Yeah, Tim Hutton, Tom Cruise, and Sean Penn.
exactly, and Sean Penn. Yes, I think it was Tom Cruise's first movie. He was a kid anyway. But anyway, when I had come back, fast forward through 1979, when I come back after the hostage crisis per se in Iran, they were just shooting that movie at the time at Valley Forge, and of course, being an alumni, graduating from there. They invited me up there, and I got to meet those guys and have dinner with them, and that was quite a treat. So after I graduated from there in 1974, the economy was really piss poor here in the United States.
Hmm.
Israel had just gone to war again with all their friends and buddies over there in the sandbox at the 1973 Yom Kippur War, and of course, we normally we backed Israel, so the Arabs turned off and OPEC turned off the oil valve for us, and that just crushed the nation. If people remember back in 73, 74, we went from like 89 cents a gallon to $4 a gallon for a short time. That just crippled the country. So there was no jobs. There was nothing, nowhere to go. They were laying people off left and right. Um, Luckily, I had applied for, put application into and got a congressional appointment to Annapolis, the Naval Academy, which I was really, very happy. The trouble is that I had to be put on a medical waiver because I had a heart murmur
Okay.
in itself. So waiting, and waiting, for the board to come through with the approval on that. Time just got tough. So at that moment, Saigon had not fallen in the Vietnam War yet. They were winding it down. It was inevitable that we were going to get out of there, and it was going to go. It was going to close. So I said, well, hell, we're not fighting anymore over there. Active for the most part. So that's how I became a Vietnam veteran area. Oh, I'm sorry, era veteran. Had never been served in Vietnam, but was in boot camp while the war was still going on over there. And basically, it was just happenstance that I joined the Marine Corps that way. I went down to the AFI station. John, you remember what they called the AFIs back then, the Armed Forces Enlistment Center. And I was looking for, just barely to talk to people about recruiters and, what my options were and things like that. I just happened to get down there in Philadelphia at the time when they were all at one station. The Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, and they were all literally out to lunch that day. And every one of them takes a chance or tour duty during lunch hour to stay open, which happened to be the Marine Corps day. So with nobody else being there, out to lunch, literally, I sat and talked with the recruiter and just asked him questions in general. And till this day, I can't remember what the hell he ever did to sell me on the Marine Corps. Maybe it was the uniforms, maybe it was the bullshit stories that he had. I don't know. But next thing I know is I'm signing papers and waving my hand. It's October of 1974, and next thing I know is that I wanted to stay there and have my last birthday on October and have the last Halloween, last Thanksgiving, November, and Christmas. And he says, "Well, here's a lucky package they have for you. It's a delayed enlistment program." And I said, "Oh yeah, it's great." So I shoved off in January. I signed up in 74, but in 1975, signed up and went off into the Marine Corps.
Okay. The one thing I wanted to ask too on that is, so you're talking about your parents, so Irish mom, German father, and then you also went to Catholic school. I imagine it's pretty strict around there. Like attention to detail, very
Oh
disciplined.
hell yeah! Back there in the '60s, the nuns that were that were running the place were like little Gestapo penguins, and they had corporal punishment. I mean, they could slap you, spank you, whack you with the ruler. I mean, I remember one time I turned around and was talking to the little girl behind me because I was hot on her at the time, and I had this little puff in the back of my head, and there's this cloud of dust. And Sister Austin Mary, I can remember that for the rest of my life. She could have pitched for the Dodgers, for God's sakes. She threw an eraser, a chalkboard eraser, from the front of the probably 40 feet from the front of the classroom, hit me square to the back of the head. And it was Mr. Kraus, turn around and shut your mouth. And just remember, just like, yeah, I reached back and I looked up and I said, I got all this, white powder. She, that's just one of many times that things would, that would happen. So yes, it was very regimented in my life when I grew up.
So maybe you sought that out kind of in your military service. Maybe when you talk about the recruitment side of it, you mentioned the uniforms, and I guess there's so much attention to detail, and just it's the structure of it. Maybe that's something that appeals to you.
It did at the time, yeah, because the Marine Corps, they were just really physically fit, especially this. He was a staff sergeant at the time in E6, and he just looked like he was in great shape. He was poured into his uniform, but see, he had also had been a drill instructor, with a DI, and those guys are probably in the best shape of anybody that you could ever see. They are just chiseled out of granite. They spend just every single day, twice a day, in physical training, and you don't never see a fat or out of shape Marine drill instructor.
Mm-hmm.
So that with the attention to detail, with the traditions that come with the Marine Corps. I mean, the reasons, everything on a uniform, no matter what you wear, has a meaning, and that's why we carry the traditions. The red stripe down the side, the quatrefoil knot on the top of the officers' helmets or their hat, and the dress. Everything about it is specific, and it's there for a reason. And it comes from history of battles and the traditions and accolades that have been given, over the 200 years that we've been in existence.
Okay, so you said that you had a heart murmur, and now in the book you mentioned that does cause you to take a certain path in your career. Can you kind of explain from there how you end up in Cyprus, and then we'll kind of go from that point?
Well, it kept me out from going and being my ideas. If in a how can I put this? I wanted to go to Annapolis, and in my book is that I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. I wanted to be an officer. I wanted to lead what I thought at the time, with my dad and my uncles at the time, I believed to be the finest and the bravest and toughest warriors that America had. And I was brokenhearted when they said, well, the heart, it doesn't keep you out of service. It does keep you out from Annapolis. So when I got that letter, it broke my heart. And I said, but you can still serve in the United States, anything that you want to do. You couldn't jump out of airplanes, not that I wanted to. You couldn't scuba dive for the most part, pressures, things like that. I said, well, it limits you in what you can do in areas. So, I sat and talked with my brother-in-laws who had both been in Vietnam and in the service members. And they talked to me and they said, just make sure when you get in there, no matter which branch you take, that you get a contract. Because if you don't get a contract, they're just going to, you'd be painting tanks or scrubbing floors. You never know what the hell you're going to be doing. So my ASVAB test scores were off the charts. I mean, it doesn't mean I was extra smart. It just means Valley Forge Military Academy taught me how to take tests, special military tests. I scored. I could have been anything I wanted to, provided you could, pass the qualifications, for sites and things like that. So I kicked it around, and I thought that I signed a contract with the Marine Corps to go in as an aviation or air traffic controller, combat air traffic controller at the time. And I said, that was great. I said it was challenging. I didn't have to really go out into the war fields that I was looking for the most part. You could sit around in the radar tower and the control tower, drink coffee, get up and go to the bathroom. I mean, weren't going to be freezing or anything like that. Did a tour on the USS Nimitz, which is an aircraft carrier, when I was assigned to a F4 Phantom Squadron. And we went aboard the Nimitz, and we were there for 66 days. And that was kind of interesting. And I wouldn't want to make a living in the Navy, living aboard a ship like that. It's too cramped of a space. That was beyond me. It was funny because my buddy was in the Navy at the time, and he was stationed on the Nimitz. And once we deployed on there, the second day, I got to meet him and see him at the chow hall. So we spent a little bit of time together. And then for 63 days in a row, I never saw him again. It was that busy. It was something like 4,800, 5,000 people on the Nimitz at the time. I said, oh my God, it's so busy, and it was amazing. But for the most part, that's where the most amount of combat or action I ever saw at that point. So now we're getting into about 1970, 77. And I was stationed at the Marine Corps Air Station in Beaufort, South Carolina, and there was nothing there. They call it Fighter Town East, and it's a swamp. It's right across from Paris Island, if anybody's ever been there. And there's nothing there. It's all swamp back in the 70s for the most part. And my job for a daily routine got to be so mundane and nothing to do besides just our squadrons would take off. We'd have to just pass them through the regular FAA traffic that's going up and down, the East Coast, make sure that they don't bump into any, commercial airliners. And then we shove them off out into the what we call the warning areas out over the ocean. They go play their aircraft maneuvers, and then they come back in, and we sequence them in. So it's really today almost the job, if they do it the same way, would be done by computer. They wouldn't even freaking need us. So I got bored with that. I was wondering what the heck else I can do. At the time, the Middle East was starting to heat up, and I had a choice of either re-enlisting or getting out. And the prospects didn't look too good at the time in the economy. And I was doing very well because all the ranks that I went through from E1 to E4, including E5, was meritorious. I was very, very good at my job, and I showed a lot of ability and leadership. I was basically
it opened some doors for you.
Yeah, some of the people that have been in the Marine Corps, the lifers that have been there saying, look, you got an opportunity here, guy, to either go to the drill field or, try embassy duty. And I've only ever heard about embassy duty, and, for the most part. And I said, well, let me look at that. And I looked into it, and it was one of the most challenging things you're ever going to do in the Marine Corps. Everything is so not just spit and polish perfect, but you're dealing with a different entity. The Marine Corps has operational control, or I say administrative control over you. But for the most part, you work for the U.S. Department of State Department. Yeah, and they have the actual operation control over you. They tell you what to do, when to do it, and how you're going to do it. And I said, well, you get to go to foreign countries and meet strange and wonderful new people, and either get along with them or kill them. That's just the way it was. Now you got to remember, back in the 70s, we didn't have the advent of the computers. There's no internet or anything like that. And there wasn't even any emails. We're still looking at the NATO and Warsaw Pact. It wasn't the friendly Russians you had today. It was the Soviet Union. All of Europe was under the Iron Curtain. You talk about an Iron Curtain, and people look at you today like, oh, what was that? And I'll think back with it was 1989 when Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Well, we were the friggin' wall.
Yeah. I think a good point that you're bringing up too is that people have to realize at this time, like this is before the cell phones and the internet and everything, that, sometimes the news, it could be a day late, it could be a week late. So people on one side of the planet are not hearing about things right away. So anything that you think about another part of the world, I mean, it's already historical. But I also like how you mentioned, like, you're talking about the Middle East and you're kind of learning about it. Even in the book, you mentioned part of the story where you're like, I'm going to go over there and learn. You make it sound like you're going on a trip, like a vacation. You're like, I'm going to learn about all this historical stuff.
That's what I thought it was.
Is quite the opposite. Or, well, you
Right.
experience the worst parts of history, that's for sure.
Yeah, they've been going at it since day one. I mean, especially in the 7th century with the advent of Mohammedanism and then changed to Islam. You know, there's a big shift in between them over there. Is that they had the Sunni and the Shiite, very similar to today's Christianity, where you have Catholicism or Orthodox, and then the Protestant. So it's my Jesus is better than your Jesus. My side of Muhammad is better than your side of Muhammad, and those people take that very seriously. I mean, that comes first in their life more than anything. But yeah, you're right. It was sold to me as hey, go out there to other countries. And when I went over to and stopped off in Europe, by the way, at that time there was the Soviet Union was still running Europe, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, all the countries you see today. They weren't. They were all satellites. East and West Berlin. It was East and West Germany. For God's sakes, people don't think, oh, that's only about 40 years ago, pal. It's not that long ago.
Yeah.
It's just that we don't talk about it, and it's not taught in the schools. So people are going to either forget about it or they're doomed to go over it again. And what do you got? Fascists and Nazis and people like that running for office in the United States today. So I mean, you didn't think you'd forget about it. Well, it's in our backyard.
So you end up in Cyprus. You take that first job. And you're not there very long before you get this, we'll call it the offer. I was going to say opportunity. I don't think it turned into an opportunity. It was more just an offer to go, but it's kind of sold to you. Not like you didn't really get told anything about it, right? You didn't go and educated on it.
No, there was there's no internet. You just can't click and go, oh, where's Nicosia, Cyprus? It was interesting. I did some history on it let me backtrack. So I decided to stay in the Marine Corps in 1977 and 78. I re-enlisted and I made sergeant. And then I went off to Embassy Guard School. And we were the last class to graduate Henderson Hall up in Virginia. That was headquarters Marine Corps. And depending on the size of your class, we started with about 80 people and we graduated like 40, 44, half get washed out or can't meet the requirements. And, where you stand in school is where you get to pick your choice of what's open in the MSG. If, John, Marine Security Guard Battalion. And they are the only unit that is authorized or appointed to guard embassies around the world. So anyway, my opportunity, I graduated fourth in my class. So I was looking at Nicosia and basically you're going to put in a 30-month tour or 36-month tour, depends what your contract's about. And I had a 36 a tour. So usually they have you about half your tour is what they call a hardship post. And then the other half is a luxury post. Okay. What's the difference? Well, if it was up to Marine Corps, they make them all luxury posts, But if there was something for the most part, either going to a third world toilet bowl country where they didn't even have flushing, toilets and things like that, or that there's a active war going on for the most part, or that it's just what it's up to, anywhere they were in a communist country, it would have been an 18-month tour. So you do half your tour there, and then whatever company that you're with, A company being Europe, B company being Africa, you could pick usually people would go say, okay, we're going to go to Africa and Brazzaville, Congo at the time, right? And the Marine house where they stayed, still had clay dirt floors. I mean,
wow.
that's how, yeah. It was, and they had to put, they showed pictures of it when we had, I'd say, information books that you could look at that the detachment would send back to headquarters so you could take a look at it because there was no internet. And I said, what's this? Why is this Marine house got bars on the windows and concertina wire around it and et cetera, et cetera? And you got terrorists or, what is it? And they said, no, it's because the wild monkeys that would break into the place and steal things. They were always coming back when people had, no joke. They would have, their wallets were missing and, there was things always, broken or stolen. And of course we, live by a code of honor. We don't lie, steal, cheat, and we don't tolerate people that do. So there was a lot of, mayhem going on over there. And eventually they put the State Department secret squirrels put some cameras up, long story short, and they caught these monkeys tearing out the windows and sneaking in and just taking any little shiny thing or anything, or tearing places up. And they said finally, they had to treat the place and harden it security wise to keep the monkeys from coming in. So you'd look at your book and say, I don't think that's going to be one of my top choices, So when I was looking at Nicosia, Cyprus, it's a little Greek island, per se, in the southeast corner of the Med. It's just dead south of Turkey and just west of Israel. And it had a lot of history to it, and biblical history, if you like that, and I do. I mean, there's things to do, archaeology over there. Is nobody's shooting at each other for the most part? Wrong. Well, 1974, what happened is that there was a political turmoil, and Turkey, which is a NATO country, and Greece, which is a NATO country, don't like each other. Mm-hmm. Greeks and Turks have never got along for thousands of years, and it hasn't changed. So anyway, the United States had just authorized a bunch of new money and military equipment to Turkey. They turned around and used it and invaded Cyprus. And it took them about 3 days, and half the island was taken over. So what caused it was now we had contingents from the UN, like the Canadian contingent, CanCon, Danish contingent, DanCon, whatever it is, and they would form a green line between the Greeks and the Turks, keeping them from going at each other for the most part. So that was interesting because we got to whenever we could go from the Greek to the Turkish side back and forth, but the Greeks and the Turks could not. Okay. So, and the UN was there. So the presence of the UN troops, peacekeeping forces, how useless they are.
So even when you get over there, though, you're seeing some of this, like the remnants of it.
It's great. Yeah. We get to see the remnants of it, and you get to learn about, for the first time, Special Air Service, the British, badasses, the Special Boat Service, all the guys that used to say, "Oh, this is where they train. This is where they hide these guys, these trained killers, for what they're worth." Because we went there and we'd sometimes go down and shoot at the range at Episcopi Airport or Akrotiri Sovereign Air Base, His Majesty's whatever, where the Brits were. And that was pretty interesting. So they like to come up and get away from that bullshit and see us and go to the Marine House and laugh and drink and, have a good time together. So you share a lot of brotherhood. And some of these guys had been over, in the Middle East and, in the action where it was. Places like right next door was Beirut. If you remember back in the 70s and 80s, Beirut had bombs going off every other day over there. They were going at it. So with all those factions. So you're being in the right back door. You're looking at it. You're hearing people. You're talking to people, and it's like news every day on the station. Everybody's involved in it for the most part.
With all that going on, how does this posting in Iran come up, and what are your thoughts initially when that does?
Well, it's funny because again, very similar in the operations. The Shah of Iran, Shah Reza Pahlavi, was having trouble keeping his country together. He was in the middle of what nobody could understand or even envision, him falling apart and losing that country. Now, you've got to think back, if you've ever studied it, that Iran is actually ancient Persia. They're not Arabs, and don't call them an Arab. They take it personal. They are Persians, and they're very proud of it. They don't speak Arabic. They speak Farsi. So, you find them in your Bible, you find them in history, Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, Xerxes, all the guys, they're all from that area. And it's 2.5 times the size of Texas. You take a look at Texas, you can't even drive across it in a day, barely. So this is 2.5 times the size of that. And it's a very strategic spot when you look at it, just south of Russia, just east of everything. And it's it was a big oil company, a big oil platform also. And the Shah and the family's been our friends, probably allies, I'd say, since World War II. So basically, nobody really, in the big economic picture in the State Department ever thought that it would fall down or fall apart. And again, the Soviet Union was still, running things in the Middle East. But we were basically, coming up with the Star Wars program and basically bankrupting them. They couldn't keep Cuba and all these little countries, socialist countries, fed and keep their, military machine going for the most part. So you can see the handwriting on the wall. Who knows really until you look at some of the other books that I used in reference to writing my book, how when Iran was falling apart and it was becoming a fundamentalist, when going from a semi-monarchy to a theology kind of theocrat type of government, and we needed that embassy over there in Iran, and then we had also in certain countries, if they're big enough or important enough, we'll have consulates in other cities. And look, I'm going to get my ass chewed for this one, but I mean, everywhere in any embassy in the world, you got spies. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll challenge anybody that should prove me wrong with that. And it's not just our embassies. Everywhere, everybody spies on everybody. That's just the way it is. Okay. And I mean, they're not all, killers like you see on television or like that, but everybody is studying everybody else's economics, anywhere that's going on, it could be a problem. I mean, we had alphabet agencies I'd never even heard of. Yeah. CIA, DEA, FBI, Secret Service, NRO, and what was that? That's the guys that run the satellites and things like that there. NSA, no such agency, they call it, and you weren't even allowed to talk about it. And people had different badges, different identities. Sometimes they have a fake ID. They would be the second attache to, the commerce bill, or something like that. But really, we know who they were, and but you never talked about it. What I'm saying, when I'm getting at that, is that these people operated in and out of the embassy. That was their home. Also up in Isfahan or Tabriz, up in the different parts, Cyprus girls. At that time, this being in the location where it was phenomenal, because that southern part of Russia basically was where they did their missiles and their nuclear testing a lot. And right across the Caspian Sea, up in the Ellsberg Mountains. And we were up there, not the Marines, for the most part, the United States would be up there sniffing and snorting back then, watching the Soviets. We had the strategic arms limitation, the SALT I agreements for disarmament going on. And it was a big thing. They're trying to get the SALT II treaty with Jimmy Carter going through. But at the time, Congress wouldn't go with it unless, of course, he had verification, trust but verify, that type of deal. And the Russians knew that. So it was very important. Whenever they tested a missile or tested anything, all the information about where they did what they did was in and around that area. So it was, and they fed it back through the embassy. So those guys were up in the mountains, traveling back and forth all the time. When it was ever decided or whatever that the Shah was not going to be able to hold his country, and he found out he was terminal with cancer, he exited the country with a couple billion of dollars. I think something like $25 billion. That's nothing today compared to, and now we're talking trillions. But back then, 1979, he left, and the Ayatollah Khomeini came in. And when all that, shall we say, literally chaos and turmoil was going on, they were pulling Americans out, and they were basically getting just the normal operations of a diplomatic mission. They're going to change it over to a skeleton crew only, and just what they needed there. But moving people back from American-owned companies, Sikorsky was there, Bell and Howell was there, EDS was there with Ross Perot. So there was thousands and thousands of Americans over there, and when you try to start pulling them out all at once, you'll see the chaos that it causes. So they needed extra security in some of the areas, especially at the embassy.
Okay.
So that's when the call went out. To answer your question, they went out to what they call the fat embassies, the embassies that didn't have a major or specific terroristic threat, or some of the fat embassies. The fat embassies were the ones like Rome, where you had 30 MSG. Stockholm or Madrid. Those were, when I talking about the difference between our embassy being a hardship post, those were posts people went to because there was never anything that happening there.
Yeah.
It was a lot more fun. There was a lot more beautiful single women. I mean, it's just that he wanted to, see a night, Paris, London, things like that. So we would pull one or two Marine guards from different posts that could afford it, and send and ship them back over to Iran for temporary extra duty.
Okay.
TAD. John understands TAD. I guess in the Army they call it traveling around drunk, but we call it temporary additional duty. And so that's how the posting came up, and the gunnery sergeant had asked me to say, "Hey, I got this opening over here, and in Iran, and you go there for 90 days, and then et cetera, et cetera." And I said, that sounds interesting. So I did a little more history check, and I said, yeah, that sounds like fun. Let's go over there and go to ancient Persia and see what can be had said, because I'm here in Cyprus, and I mean, if you look at the biblical history of it from Christianity's point of view, St. Paul had been through there 3, 4, 5 times, and he talked about it in his New Testament. So that was interesting, and the castles from the Crusaders and everything. I was having a ball of a time. So I said, yeah, why not? Here's an opportunity to get over there and, see ancient Persia.
It makes me think of when you see people nowadays with all the internet and everything else available to them who choose to go to certain parts of the world and say, oh, no, it's great. And I'm going to show you these people are great. And, then they go there and they get beheaded. And you're like,
yeah,
that's kind of maybe your mentality was a little bit like that, but you didn't have all that information available to you. You didn't know this stuff was going on in the world, and there was no way to really find that out. And then it was kind of sold to you a little bit as like, hey, yeah, go check this place out. And you're like, okay, like, why not? I want to see some historical architecture or learn things. And then, it turns into what it turned into. So
exactly right. The gunny said, hey, he said, what do you know about Tehran? And he said, well, a little bit. And he said, well, why don't you read up on it and before you sign up and volunteer to do this. So I did, but the little bit that was available and the way they sold it was nothing like what was going on.
Yeah.
And it was so bad is that when I finally got the postings that you're taking off to go, they had me in a 3-piece suit, and and I took off from the airport at Larnaca Airport and flew to Athens, and then after a couple of days in Athens to get my paperwork processed, Athens, Greece, I flew over to Tehran. When I landed in Tehran, it looked like downtown Beirut. It looked like Gaza, what it is today. I mean, cars were burnt out, buildings were on fire. There was bodies in cars. It was a war zone. People were shooting at each other. The Shah's people had supporting the Shah had declared martial law, and of course, the insurgents and terrorists who were supporting, well, there was a dozen of them. I can't even name them all, but the Fedayeen, Mujahideen, all kinds of different people, players didn't like the Shah, but they didn't trust Khomeini either. And then you got the troublemaking Russians in there stirring the pot, et cetera, et cetera. So when I landed, I'm at the airport and I'm in a 3-piece suit, and then my escort drives up in what they called, if John remembers back, an M113. It's a personnel carrier. Wow. And it's meant to, that's my taxi. That's my Uber back then.
Yeah, armored personnel carrier. I mean, it's a
exactly
big,
right.
Big boxy, it's a big boxy piece of armor with tank treads.
Exactly what it was. So when the and the one Marine walks up with the another, I'd say, political officer from the embassy, and he's in combat gear. I mean, flak jacket, hard helmet, and then he says, he identifies himself and he picks me out right away, and he goes, and he eyeballs me up and down like I'm going to a cocktail party. He goes, what in the hell are you doing in that suit? Don't worry about it. And I said, holy shit, this is what they told me. So here's the disconnect from what the information, quote, intel is. That normally, if it would have been 2 years earlier, that would have been the way to travel. But in the meantime, the country's falling apart and they're shooting at each other. So he gives me a flak jacket to put on. I put it on over top of my my suit. And I remember it was a light blue suit. And it's a three-piece suit that they buy you and tailor made for you. So, when you work at the embassies, plain clothes.
Say light blue, you're going to stand out wearing baby blue or something over there.
It was ridiculous. And so he said, I said, how about my luggage and stuff? I said, luggage? And he said, get in, get in your taxi over here is what he called it. He says, we'll get your luggage later. So, I get in there, he gives me a helmet. I put the helmet on and I go, what the fuck is this? And there's little slits in the side where you can, that could be windows, but actually they're slots so you could shoot back and shoot out.
The gun ports. Yeah.
Yeah, you got gun ports. And I said, damn, never seen anything like this. I mean, in boot camp I did, but that's about as far as it ever got. I'm used to sitting in a control tower with my coffee. So I'm looking and I'm driving in, it takes off. We drive back to the embassy and anything gets in our way, like John said, it's tracked vehicle. It's just up and over top of it. They don't care. You don't stop because it's, most probably going to be an ambush. I said, ambush? I haven't heard that word. Or he said, well, they got a unit got ambushed just a week ago. And the guy's telling me the story. I said, holy shit. What kind of, what kind of a hell spot they get into? We roll up on the gates of the embassy, and after some identification, they let us through and close the gates again. And everybody's in combat gear, BDUs, battle dress uniforms. And I was embarrassed. Get out of there. And the people eyeballing me going like, who's this new schmuck coming in through here?
That was your intro to it.
That was my introduction to Iran. It's like, yeah.
I'm wondering if you could explain for people too, just like what the daily life was like in there. So you're in a walled compound. You're not necessarily just going out wherever you want, when you want. It's not a shopping trip. So what is it like being inside there?
So it's probably October of 1978, and yes, the American embassy is a walled compound, about 27 acres. And there's some breaks in the area where it's not solid wall, but for the most part, the architecture, embassies and consulates are built. They're diplomatic missions. They're not meant to be hardened posts. They are now since they started blowing the shit out of them, and assaulting them. We started that game, so they had to harden the embassies or move them, if not anywhere else, and build new ones all over the world. They were just too soft. And then when we learned the hard way, when you start, driving vehicles right through the main gate, shooting at them is not going to do any good. And especially if it's a car bomb, it gets in and it devastates buildings. You remember what happened to the Marine barracks in 1983, 241, boom, in one building, so we can't have that happen again. Anyway, so because we have what they call we were temporary duty that were there, and we weren't part of the main crew that was assigned to the embassy. We didn't work inside too much. The guys that were stationed there to begin with, the Marines, I think there was about a dozen of them that was there just at that time, and they would do their duties and on the inside for the most part. We had the outer perimeter. Anything outside the ambassadors or the DCM, Deputy Chief of Mission, number 2. The guy, anything outside their residence or anything outside the Chancery building, anything on the compound or anything just outside the fence was ours. We would also do physical security when some of the secret squirrels had to be driven or taken places. We bodyguard them in a personal protection detail. The ambassador, he would go with his own DSS, Department of Security, secret squirrels, but he'd also, if it was going to be through a tough area of town, he'd take us with him. Some of us would be in a combat gear. Other ones would be, for the most part, civilian clothes. So we wouldn't stand out. The Shah's people, you could tell, the Shah's army were getting shot up and back and forth in ambushes and like in any civil war. So if you looked like you were military, you were prime target out there.
One of the things that you bring up in the book too is part of your job was as security, that you were always on the lookout for, as you mentioned earlier, spies. So people inside the compound taking pictures where they shouldn't take pictures. You mentioned something about documents. Like if somebody has a document that's classified, they basically are only allowed to have it in their hands while they're reading it. And like as soon as they're done, they got to put it down. Like the protocols around there are very, very strict.
Extremely strict. I mean, that's the protocols and the operating procedure at any embassy. For the most part, there's several different areas where you work as a MSG, and depending on what your tour duty was that day, sometimes it would be armed security outside and sometimes it'd be dog and pony shows where you wear the dress blues, and you see a lot of that stuff on the movies and things like that, where they wear the dress blues. But, places like Beirut and stuff, no, you didn't wear dress blues. You were in combat gear 24/7. But we were the police. We were the ones that had the weapons, the keys, the codes, and what we said goes when it comes down to the final say so in physical security. Yes, we had to watch out for everybody was suspect in there. Okay, we don't know whether it's the spies, the clean. I'll give you an example. We caught one in Nicosia, and she was a housewife. I mean, a house worker. They call them FSLEs, Foreign Service Local Employees, and they come in and they had to be watched physically. You cannot let them out of your view. Okay, they weren't allowed for the most part in any classified area. You go in an area where people work on classified materials, things like that. That's very restricted. It's vault rooms or even whole offices where it depends on how it's classified. If you work with a document on your desk, and every document that's classified is usually going to be confidential, secret, top secret, things like that. It's very difficult to ever see anything with this top secret. I've seen 2 envelopes in my entire life over there in different embassies that said top secret. There's just not a lot of top secret stuff that people, see that's allowed. Secret, yeah, you see a lot of that stuff, but you don't get to read them. You're just looking at the stamp and the color on the edges of the border. And if somebody gets up and goes again and get a cup of coffee, they leave that there while we're doing our routine patrols, walking through it. We snatch it up and we write them up. We write up a report on it, and it's the offense was a JF-11 form for whatever that was, and there'd be an investigation. They bring their own people from the OSA in and do investigation of why that was left open and protocols. And if more than if that happens more than a couple of times, you can be sent home and you can be charged. You could be fired or charged. So things like that would go on. What I said about we caught one of the women putting a microphone in a flower pot, and she was a cleaners. So when cleaners came in, if there's 2 or 3 of them and you were on the cleaning detail, you watched them and eyeball them. They were not allowed out of your sight. It's not one didn't get to go to the bathroom, one didn't get to go over here. All 3 stayed in that portion, and then all 3 moved at once. And it was tedious, but you never know what the heck they were doing. And back then, you got to watch and see if they weren't taking pictures of things or planting bugs and devices, or things like that. So that's just part of the normal everyday routine in every embassy, every consulate, around the world. And it's just one of many things. Stuff like when we had to get rid of classified materials. At the end of the day, we were the ones that would go around and have to go pick up all the shredding. Mm-hmm. Everything that was shredded during the day, make sure it was properly shredded, and you get the shred bag, and nothing that was classified could be ever in an unclassified shred bag. And they were different colors. And then, we'd collect those up, tie them up, put a seal on them, and then we take them to the burn room when we were responsible for burning them, actually put them into a furnace, every embassy. And now they were all shredded almost into confetti. Then we put them into the burn bag. The burn bag goes into the furnace. The furnace flash flies them. And the filters of the ashes that went up, we would collect out once a month. So that's how tight some of that stuff was.
Who's piecing that back together?
Yeah, you didn't have it. Yeah, it was crazy. And we didn't have computers back then like you got now. Laptops, they weren't yet heard of, and or cell phones or anything like that. So the old word processors are literally typewriters. If you were typing on something, we could walk by and look in and make sure if you were typing classified or stuff that was related, you had to have a special type of typewriter ribbon in there, that cartridge, and it had to be just for classified. If you were typing unclassified on the classified thing, there's another, JF-11 form. So it happens all the time. Physical security was 24/7. When you're on duty, you have to act in, I'd say, the mental mode of orange, not quite red, but you had to say everybody could be a potential spy. Everybody could be a potential bad guy. or just sloppy and stupid, and it doesn't matter because they
Yeah.
can use that as an excuse, And then of course,
So while you're there, maybe we'll kind of go to the day that all this happens in the book. So now you're in Iran, you're at the embassy, you get kind of a rude introduction to everything. Can you talk a bit about the day that we are going to talk about when we mention the book? So February 14th of 79. Um, you want to run through that from wherever the beginning is for you? You want to start that story for people?
well, it's should you say about November of '78, we started getting a lot more violent attacks against the embassy. Now they would start over about a mile away or so at the soccer stadium, big huge soccer stadium. Soccer is like a Super Bowl over there. That's their sport, besides beheading people, soccer's their number one sport. And so you get 70, 80,000 people in that stadium and ranting and raving and getting them all worked up. And then they start marching down what they call Taktajamchi Boulevard. That's a main boulevard where all the embassies are from all over the world, the Brits, the Canadians, whatnot. And depending on where they're at and what kind of a leadership they got going at the most time, you got all kinds of factions in there, and they're hiding in there, very much like what you see, today with BLM and Antifa. You got a bunch of people that's going along with the game, and a lot of, wannabes that just want to be seen there, or that they're getting paid to be out there. Then you got some hardcore, terrorists that hide in there, and they'll pull out a machine gun or something and fire into the embassy or throw a Molotov cocktail over the fence or something. Just basically harassment. So when we saw them coming down, there'd be thousands of them, and you got to look at something. When you look in my book, I've got pictures of it. The book. You look at that and you say, you look outside the gate and you say, man, I only got about 200 bullets on me. With my rifle and my pistol. We don't have enough bullets. Mr. Custer, there's too many Indians out there, and that's day in, day out. We could see it from building up in November, December, especially around Christmas. They were getting more violent, and they were getting more brazen. What they were doing, they would drive by in trucks at times and just spray the embassy walls, and incoming. So you didn't want to be standing out there with your thumb in your butt doing nothing. You had to be alert. You had to be watching for people that were taking pictures, and they weren't all Iranians. I mean, there was people that, a lot of Russians that were there hoping, when I was talking back, hoping something would happen, or if they stir it up. Remember, they would love to see that embassy burnt, taken down, or, knocked out of service, because they know that it was a nest of spies. It was always in their backyard. It was a pain in the ass, kind of like what Guantanamo Bay is, in Cuba. And Castro and his brothers hated that for, 40, 50 years. It's a thorn in their side. So we talk with our CIA guys. We get intel briefs all the time. So we understand, what's out there. And it's a harassment for the most part, because we can't shoot back outside the embassy.
Okay.
Anything that's on that, supposedly anything that's on that wall and on the inside, is American sovereign territory. We own it. Okay. We're responsible for it. Anything on the other side of the wall, for the most part, all the way out to the street, was the Farsi police or the local, Day or something like that. Their local police and whatnot. And then out in the streets is just, have at it. You never know. It was Shah's people at one time and his army, and then another week it was a bunch of terrorists. So we did, like you said earlier, we never left the embassy unless it was a duty to move stuff or to be a part of a security detail. We couldn't go down to the bazaar, couldn't go to the airport, and I couldn't do anything. Shopping, no, forget that. It was you were on duty. You went to the Marine House and slept, and you went back on duty. So it was
Okay.
not the picture they sent me from Cyprus. It was crazy. So they had to put uniforms together for me for the first couple of days until they got my stuff from the airport, which had been looted and gone through, and I'm glad I didn't have anything of great value there.
Yeah.
So it got a little hairy once in a while. And then we roll into 1979 in January, and that's when the Shah, it came out the news that he was terminal with cancer, and that a lot of his military was now just tired of fighting and tired of shooting at each other. They're shooting at their brothers or cousins, kind of like a civil war that we had here in the United States. Members of the same family would pick opposite sides, blue and gray. Very similar over there, pro and anti-Shah, or whoever's paid to be that flavor of the week. So when he decided, really, for the most part, to just upend and leave and abdicate, and leave a vacuum there. I think it was January the 16th, or we heard the 15th, because right near the Super Bowl. I remember hoping that with this news, it was the
wouldn't affect watching it.
Yeah, because we said, okay, we're going on 24-hour watches. In other words, you're on for 12, you're off for 12, back and forth. I said, well, I hope I get the 12 off for the Super Bowl. And I do believe it was the Steelers and the Cowboys, with the Steelers winning. And that was old Bradshaw, I believe. Anyway, so it was near January 16th. The next thing you know is that, the Shah's leaving the country. And I remember, having to go to a briefing. There's a briefing over at the Chancery Building. You muster out now. I said, man, it's in the middle of the freaking Super Bowl. I said, you're kidding me? So anyway, we found out, we got the briefing that, Shah's going to be leaving here, et cetera, et cetera. Here's what it means security-wise and whatnot. The RSO, Regional Security Officer, who was a State Department employee, Rick Tomseth, he gave us the briefing, and it was pretty grim. He said, we expect, once the Shah's gone, these people and the army's going to capitulate. This whole city and this whole country's just going to, fall apart. Just go fucking bananas. And it did. I mean, it's exactly what happened. And you had for like 2 weeks back and forth assaults on the embassies. We didn't go anywhere. Nobody was allowed to leave the embassy without an armed escort for the most part. We were down to normally you'd probably have 200 to 300 people working at the embassy. We were down to less than 100. I mean, we were barely skeleton. Everybody was there.
You also had your firearms were switched out, so you had the rifles taken away and just down to shotguns.
I'll get to that. Yeah, right about the 20th or so. We're just past that, beginning of February. The Ayatollah Khomeini comes in, and he's the forerunner of who's going to be into this vacuum that they couldn't find a government leader. One guy's name was Entezman. He failed. Shapur Bakhtiar, he failed. They couldn't get a prime minister or anybody picked in the interim. The United States was absolutely shocked. The State Department, the Shah's gone. What's going to happen to the oil in the country, and everything was just falling apart. It was complete, utter chaos, and we could tell more people coming in. They weren't Iranians. They were Russians, and all kinds of players coming in there. So when Khomeini came in, he just changed everything around. There was a lot of factions all over, tribes, literally, and they said factions, but tribes. There's a lot of different tribes and people that were Iranians, but they weren't, and Muslims, but they weren't, for the most part, pro-government. They like their own, tribal little lifestyle. And what happens is these people would get together and band to help Khomeini overthrow the government, the Shah at the time, but he's gone now. Khomeini comes in. He wants to take back all the rifles and their weapons and say, okay, calm down. I'm the new boss in town. And a lot of the tribal guys said, oh, time out. We want a piece of the action. And, so they started going at it. So it was utter chaos, and nobody knew what was going on at the time, especially since now you don't have, again, like today, the internet. You can just, pick up a phone or look and see what's going on being reported. None of that was there. Anything that was happening in the country that was going on, it took a day for somebody, at least, at the embassy, to figure out and know what was going on.
Well, it happens so fast. Like, there's no way to keep track of that. And by the time the news is making it, 50 things have happened in the meantime.
It changes. So it was about February 10th that I remember, and it was really cold. It was I talk about it in my book. It would have to be one of the coldest Februaries in the last 100 years there in that country up there. I mean, it hardly ever got above freezing. It was nasty. And we still had to stand all our posts, but, we had to have, winter gear and stuff flown in that we didn't have enough for everybody. Anyway, so when Khomeini came in, he went in and he started what they call a theocracy for the most part. and that's for the use of anything else, is that it's going to be run by a clerical type of religious law. And now that they, look under everything went from nights, a normalized what we recognize as in the 70s and the 80s of being a westernized country to the full burqas and the chadors and, Shiite Muslim rule. And it was a shock to even most of the Iranians that were there. But because he ordered bulldozers and tanks to go into the red light district downtown in Tehran and just murder people. And I got pictures of that, in the special edition of my book, and just wipe them out. They wholesale slaughter.
Yeah.
So it's things like that, we heard about, and you see the shooting and you hear it because it's not that far away from the embassy. You hear it all the time. And you said, what happened? He said he went into the red light district and where the casinos were, and where the westernized part, bars, things like that. All the bars were closed, casinos were closed. Prostitution houses, the ones that were legal at the time, they slaughtered them, took them out in the street, and just put a bullet in their head.
Wow.
It was shocking. So we went on a special alert on the 10th of February. I think it was a Sunday night, and I said we'd be 10 hours on, and then 8 to 10 hours off, and rotating. And the embassy Marines that came from other the fat embassies from like Madrid, Rome, myself, we were stationed in and around specific areas that were physically needed to be protected. Gates, a place called the Mushroom at the time. That's a CIA listening post. Was underneath the swimming pool, as a matter of fact, in the warehouse, and then you go through the warehouse underneath the swimming pool. And I said, what a place to put a secret squirrel, place. It was wild.
So you were talking just as you're getting up to February 14th. So you're at the 10th right now.
Yeah, and we'd have drive-bys that people would drive by and just shoot into the embassy. They'd be throwing the Molotov cocktails in, or just randomly with some of the high-rise apartment complexes and buildings around there, sniper fire. You had to be careful, just where you moved and how you moved at times, because we had to scan it with binoculars, make sure they weren't just sitting there waiting for you to shoot down into the embassy, randomly. It'd be a hard shot, but I mean, it's not an impossible shot. If you're standing out there, somebody just take 2, 3, 4, pot shots at you, that they could get lucky.
You were mentioning that some of your shifts were changing. So you had like these 8-hour shifts, but then on the day of, you switched to 12-hour shifts.
Yeah, well, it was a 24-hour shift. It was, I believe, it was a Tuesday night, and somehow it was the intel guys, the State Department said we anticipate an assault on a major assault or some kind of enemy action against the embassy here, specifically right there in Tehran. So what they did, they gave us the briefing, and then when we went to post a few hours later, they called us in from the post one by one. They took our M16s away. We went over to the CIA vault room, and that's in the armory basically, and traded them out for shotguns. And I said, "What the fuck is this? Why are you guys out of your mind?" I said, well, "Shotguns are good. I mean, for certain areas, but maybe in the embassy, down the hallways and things like that. Entries and SWAT tactics. But for open combat, even with a rifled slug at 50 yards, you're not going to be able to hit anything." I mean, John can attest to that for that part. I said, "But this," and I raised holy hell, because I was actually the second senior sergeant over there, but because I wasn't at the major detachment when I first checked in, remember, in my blue suit, I talked with the gunnery sergeant, the NCOIC, non-commissioned officer in charge, the ones in charge of the in command, in charge of the MSG detachment there.
Mm-hmm.
And is it Gunny Sutton? I talk about this in the book. And I said, "Gunny, what the fuck? Are you out of your goddamn fucking minds?" I said, "We're not going to be able to defend it." I went on and on and on and on. And he just sat there and he goes, And when he had enough, he goes, "This is way above my pay grade, Marine." I said, "Here's the way it is. It comes down from Washington to State Department. Now, how short that line of command is, this is what it's going to be. I said, Dad, he says, you're going to take the shotgun. You're going to get as many different shells that you want. You can have all the ammo you want, but you're having a shotgun. I said, you're lucky we're letting you as a sergeant keep your firearm, which at that time, it depends on which weapon you had, but I had chosen a Smith & Wesson 19. It was a 357 Magnum, over a 45 at the time. There were just a personal choice that I liked at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back to my post, and I'm sitting there. They took in the shotguns we had were Remington 870P, and it's a regular 870, but the P stands for police for whatever, and it has a folding stock on it. And then you got a pistol grip. So, I mean, and it had a sling on it. So, I mean, that was, interesting and it helped. But I mean, still, I'm not going to be able to engage anybody, with their, what happened is right around the corner is also, right when I say right around the corner, within almost visual distance, if it was for a couple of buildings, but less than a half a mile, was a compound, a military compound at the Amish Mag, which was a joint operation between the United States Army and the Shah's Army, worked. And it was like a National Guard center per se. And they had a huge armory over there. I mean, everything under the sun. And a lot of their weapons were the G3, what they called the JSA in Iranian. And it was an FN 30 caliber rifle, a hunting rifle. I mean, it was a 308, 7.62. And I mean, you can drop just about anything on the North American continent with that, and they can engage you. If they can see you, they can shoot at you and get you. You can't do anything but hide. So the disparity there was just insanity, and I just couldn't understand, what was going on with it. So I went back to my post, and we had 12 hours on, and then he said that when we went back to the post, he said, by the way, it's you're going to be on post for the next 24 hours. So it was a Tuesday going into Wednesday, the 13th over the 14th, and I went back to the post where I was posted, and it was a rear gate near the Caravanserai restaurant, and only certain persons that were allowed to come in and out of the embassy back through there. It was very restricted. You had to have certain credentials, and you had to be on a list to get in, or you had to go around to the front and get in the normal way. And anyway, that night, it was about midnight, and when I went back to my post and stayed up all night, and I remember hearing shooting and a lot of vehicles coming by. In my book, I talk about a lot of activity in and around the area that normally wouldn't be in the middle of the week and at that late, early in the morning. But it lasted till about 8 o'clock, and I got off of duty that morning. And I said, I got to get some sleep. I mean, it's been, I haven't had anything to eat in the last 12 hours. And I said, now I got relieved by 2 Marines that were there for the day shift. One at night, because nobody comes and goes at night. It's just a physical eye watch. And, but the other 2 Marines, relieved me. And I went into the restaurant. I had some breakfast that morning. And then I was beat. So I would working my way back to the Marine House, which is some apartments that were attached to the embassy that they had hardened on the outside, and that opened up the inside. So that's where we would stay. That's where we were sleeping. Okay, they called it a Marine House, but that's just happenstance kind of word that we used. And I remember going back in and taking off my flak jacket, taking off my helmet. I was putting my radio back into the charger, I hadn't turned it off yet, and all of a sudden I heard gunfire. Now, John can attest to that, is that the difference when you're in the military or you've been around shooting a lot, you can tell the difference between a pistol and a rifle right away. I mean, the report and the sound that comes out. And I heard pistol fire, and I said, who the hell is shooting at us? Because it's really close. And next thing I know, I heard the radio crackle. They're coming over the wall. They're coming over the wall. I'm taking rounds. And then I recognized the voice, and it was Corporal Downey. He just relieved the guys at the front desk, at the front gate, the motor pool gate, which is the major gate for people coming in and out of the embassy. And then in that few seconds that went from him crackling on the radio and letting the alert go out, that I heard rifle fire. It went from pistols to rifle. It's really loud crack, a report. And then there was more, and then more, and it increased. I go, who the hell's, we don't have rifles. So, and I said, we got shotguns. Who in the hell is shooting at everybody? And they said, coming over the wall. You guys said, I'm hit. And the old damn, John, remember the old brick radios, the Motorola's that, it looked like a cinder block. Oh my God. The trouble with them at the time is if you push the PTT, the push to talk button and held it open, it cut the channel.
Oh yeah.
So once the assaulters came over and took over the post one, which was where Corporal Downey was, they had control of the radios because then I could hear Farsi. And in between that, it went from rifle fire to automatic fire, sustained automatic fire. I said, man, this is a gunfight. What the fuck? So I put my gear back on and I said, okay, I got out to the Marine house and I looked over. Our first protocol response is get to the embassy, the Chancery building itself, and lock it down. We had protocol procedures, and first thing is get hold of the secret squirrels, the ambassador, the DCM, and protect the lives. It's kind of like what the Secret Service does with the president. When there's an alert or a problem. But I had to cross an open field. It was about 100 yards to in a straight shot, and I could look up. Remember looking up into, and I showed a picture in a book. I look up and I see people up on these high-rise apartment complexes and buildings and on rooftops, and they're just firing randomly with 30 calibers into the whole area of the compound. You can see the trees that were there in the little park area, the branches getting snipped by rifle fire. The vehicles that were parked there, you can see them getting hit and rocked a little bit on the windshield. I said, it'd be no way I get across that open field. That'd be suicide, So, and I can't get hold of anybody on the radio. You're starting to hear Farsi on the radio, so the communications, the comm has been compromised. So the next plan B is get back to the last post you were at, which is a very vital post back where the other two Marines were. So I worked my way back there, and when I got there, they were huddled down. Now in that little horseshoe area, there's a it's outside the compound, but it's connected to the embassy. Is a stop and we call it stop and rob, stop and shop, type of PX where you can buy food and things like that. And unsecured people can be in there. It's not an area they have access to the embassy. So I said we can't stay here. I said they come over the wall here. We got to find a place to hunker down. So I directed the other two Marines to go. I said you go in and clear out that. The PX, get all the workers, the Foreign Service local employees. They're Filipinos, they're Pakistanis, they're just different people from different countries working or shopping in there at the time. And we huddled them down and ended up, and the Americans that were in the restaurant where I had just eaten breakfast like 45 minutes ago, would come up and we got a head count of about 22. Now, when I say 22 Americans, they're not all Americans. Some of them are, but Foreign Service local employees. But for sake of simplicity, you just call 22 Americans. And I said, okay, let's go. We'll go in the Caravanserai restaurant. We boarded it up, put everything in front of the windows and the doors that we could, and we just waited it out. We didn't have the radios, weren't operative. You couldn't get through on them for the most part. The hard line on the phone to try to call post one, and there was nothing. The line was dead. So we're incommunicado. I mean, nobody knows where we are. We don't know what's going on. We hear all kinds of firing and shooting. And literally, I didn't know at the time, but later, once I was doing my research in the book and talking with the other Marines, they figured out there was a bunch of little firefights going on all over the place. Sometimes, and they were firing back, and they were firing us. But we had to wait. Marines had to wait until they got the terrorists, for the most part, the assailants came over the wall and actually overran us. So now it's a running gun battle back and forth.
Okay. So I was going to ask, and this just in the interest of time's sake, because we have about another 20 minutes. So you get to the restaurant, and this is where you kind of hole up, and that's where you kind of get into the initial interactions with people. We'll go through some of this because I think it's really important to the story to talk about how you got further into this being captured. But we'll leave all the details of like what it's like being in there, because I want people to really get the book. So they need to read for that, because I highly recommend they do. So I just wanted to make sure we mention that. But if you want to continue, so you're in the restaurant now. And what does that look like? What's the whole scenario going on?
So when I use the name Jack or Henry, it's Henry Lochek and Jack Hinojos. Jack's another sergeant, and Henry's a corporal. And it's funny because we got together, we did a head count and found out, and we separate the Americans and from the locals, and then we decide, look, we can't defend everywhere. We'll just make a funnel, a fatal funnel. We took everybody back into the freezer part, of the embassy. Of the restaurant. It's the most ballistically, sound place to keep them safe. So we sat down, we put our heads together. It's funny because Jack he's Mexican from, I think he grew up in El Paso, Texas, and he has a Southern Texas, but with a Spanish accent. And then Henry's from New England, where they park the car in the yard. You know what I mean? I mean, you couldn't have any more diverse difference in the two of them. And you got me from, New Jersey. The three of us, it doesn't sound like we're even speaking English together with each other. So it was and it's a Marine thing, I guess, is that, when you're under stress and when there's a certain amount of, fear, it does something to you with your training or your personality. It brings it out. The sarcasm and the jokes, just fly. And I said, look, it's just a matter of time. And looking at the situation, I said, it's just a matter of time, before, they come over the wall, because you could hear the weapons. And then just about that time, and even in the book, I relate to, you could hear the sound of a 50 caliber. Now, John, you could attest to anywhere that anybody's going on with pistols or rifles, but when somebody comes up with a 50 cal and they were blowing the doors open, it was on a Jeep, and you could hear that. It was just a boom, 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 boom. I said, holy shit. It's like an anti-aircraft. And they just opened up the steel doors and shutters that they had at the Chancery building. The protocols, they couldn't get in, and if they do, they were getting shot at. So they basically assault on the only way to get in there was to blow the doors open. That's what they did, and there's pictures of that in the book too, where they said, "Holy shit! I mean, if they are hell bent on killing people here, this isn't just a drive-by shooting." So I said, "Hey, just about that time, the gate that opens up in the area that we were out to the street, into the actual city street right there that topped the Jamshid Boulevard, just burst open. They had taken I don't know what kind of vehicle it was, but it was a half Jeep and half military type of, definitely, something that the Army used, but it was heavy enough that it, like a deuce and a half, and it blasted through and knocked the gates down. I mean, just knocked them right off the hinges. And a swarm of about 20 or 30 terrorists, swarmed in, and we were now on the inside of the restaurant. And right away they ran. We could look out the window and see if they ran over to the PXs and started looting it, taking everything out. The food, the booze, whatever's in there. I said, "Well, have at it." I said, but after a while, it seemed that when that area died down, that they were trying to get through the regular gate that our post was, but the embassy wall was too high for them to get over. So they were pushing a dumpster that was there, trying to use that as a ladder. And I said, once they get over that wall, I mean, we've lost the integrity of the compound, which I didn't know had already busted through the main gate and two other gates, and the embassy was basically overrun anyway. Then they started. I remember they started coming by and shaking the doors and looking in the windows for us. I said, it's just a matter of time before they try to come through that door. And I talked with Jack and Henry, and I said, what happens when they find out we're in here? I said, that's a damn good question. So basically, they shot the lock off the door. So they just, out of nowhere, they just started shooting the shit out of the lock on the door, and then and beating it through with the butt end of a rifle. And even though they had busted the locking mechanism on the double doors that come into the restaurant, they couldn't get it open because it was barricaded with tables and chairs and things. Somebody stuck their hand through, and we fired at them. I can't remember. 46 years ago. I mean, it was just boom, and the fight was on. So in the book, I'll describe it in graphic detail, but here, that's basically, they stood back, and I bet you they were shocked when that guy pulled what was left of his arm out of that hole. So now they know that we're in here, and so they just lit the place up. So we're shooting out the windows, and they're shooting in and back and forth, and it's just a firefight back and forth. And we're hitting a couple of them because we were lucky enough at the point where they were standing around with their thumbs in their asses. They didn't realize we were in there. As soon as we shot the first guy, they were shocked. And then when they started to open up from where they were standing, we were barricaded in. They were wide open. So we dropped 6 or 8 of them right there. I mean, it was just boom, 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 done, 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 done. And it was like the gunfight at the OK Corral. I mean, it was Tombstone. And they scattered scattered like cockroaches, and looking for cover and concealment. And the gun battle lasted back and forth. There was lulls in between, but probably about half an hour.
Wow.
And they're shooting the shit out of it. When they did get together, it was like in between, 1 or 2 of them would fire, whatever had the balls to pop their head up and shoot. But then when they got organized, they finally got a leader in there that got them organized, and they volley fire about 8, 10, 12 of them would fire all at once. And that's where it was good tactics because they kept their head down as they moved in closer. We repelled them several times, but it got to a point where we were running low on ammo. I mean, we only carried, even my BDUs and both my pockets and my, camis, I bet you I didn't have 100 rounds of a shotgun. And we were just shooting the shit out of them. And it took a little lull in the action. And, I took a situation report, and I said, okay, none of us is hit. Nobody's hurt. And I said, thank God. And I remember seeing the Americans, some of the people coming out of the back of the restaurant. I said, tell them, they could hear the shots. I mean, rifle fire and our fire inside too, and we're almost deaf because when you're firing inside, it's really blowing your eardrums out. I mean, it's not. John's been around a range once in a while, and he can attest to when somebody shoots off and you don't have your ears on, how it shocks you. Imagine that for 30 minutes.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how you came to negotiate for the group to be let go, and then ultimately you end up being taken as a prisoner?
Oh, absolutely. So at the situation report, sit rep, I let the other 2 Marines, we take account of our ammo. And I said, I got 10 or 12, whatever. We divvy it up and said, they storm again, we're going to be out of ammo. And I said, and Jack looks at me and he says, then what? I said, well, we have no orders to surrender. And I said, we just have been shooting the shit out of these bastards. I said, do you think they're going to take it easy on us? And he goes, and he looks at me and he said, cold steel. And I know what he meant. He said, they're going to get in, they're going to overwhelm us, and it's going to go hand to hand. I said, and we're trained and we do a lot of exercises like that. But unless you ever really fought somebody with a knife with the intent to stick it in them several times or slice their jugular vein and go for a kill shot, you'll do it, but you've never done it. And you know that sooner or later, they're going to overpower you. No matter how many you get, it's going to be the Alamo. You're going to get overrun. And you start to feel, you can sense them sticking you, killing you, or shooting you. And you're saying, Jesus. And he goes, yeah, man. So I said, same thing. I was just, what I'm describing to you. And I look at Jack and I said, the funny things, because I asked him, I said, you got a fighting knife? He says, what do you think? I'm Mexican. What do you think? So we laughed at each other. I had my K-bar. He had his K-bar. We look over at Henry, and Henry goes, he shrugs his shoulders. He goes, no, but there's some butcher knives in the kitchen. I said, good idea. Go get one. So he goes in and gets a meat cleaver that's kind of like a chef's knife. I said, man, what a way to go, And, so we've been looking out the windows, and there's a 2-tier restaurant. And Henry was going upstairs and watching, and he says, look, we got them guys milling around, and they're getting over the wall now. We've lost our post. We can no longer defend this area. He said, but they want to get in here really bad. And the funny thing that ironic is that we're looking around, we're saying, this whole building here is made out of wood. Hope they don't get the idea of torching this place, because it would turn into an inferno. And it's a very disturbing thought right there. I'm glad they didn't think about that. But they were trying to get ways to get into us. I don't know if they knew how many of us that were actually in there, as we were firing from the top and the bottom, and we'd move to different spots. If you were on their side of the fence, they would think that there was 8 or 10 of us, but there's only actually 3. So anyway, while we were talking and still keeping an eye on going on, I noticed that there was a guy that had climbed over the concertina wire and used a pipe, a steam pipe above ground, or some kind of plumbing pipe. Anyway, he'd worked his way around behind us and came into and was now between us and his group of people. And as he coming around, I couldn't let him get into the area where he could be, because he could cause a crossfire and really get us from a side angle. So as he came around, he was looking and pulling on doors and checking windows. He came around and I put my shotgun out right in front of him, and it startled him because there's the old glass casement windows that are 1 foot square, and they're 3 layers thick. And they've been all shot out. So when he walked by, he walked right in front of it. I put my shotgun out, and I went for the trigger. And it's weird because he was in I got a picture of him in the book, and he's in like a 3-piece suit with a helmet and a bandolier of ammo. He looked like, I said, what the heck? What? And that's the only thing, is that he looks so weird because he's got 308, it looked like 30 caliber belted, that would go to a machine gun like an M60 or something. And he's carrying an Uzi, a 9mm. I said, what the hell? Anyway, so something told me not to pull the trigger. He didn't, he just froze. He didn't go for his weapon. And I said, don't move. And I said something in Farsi to him. And he looks at me and I said, do you speak English? And he said, a little. I said, don't move, motherfucker. Don't even flinch. I'm going to splatter your brains all over that wall behind you. So now we're at an impasse, and he can't move, I can't move, but his guys can see me and I can see him. So whoever shoots first, that's the way it's going to be. It's literally a Mexican standoff. So I said, I don't know who you are, what you want. And I'm negotiating with this guy, and I hear a little voice in my head saying, don't kill him, don't kill him, don't kill him. I said, hey, he's your gravy train. He's your way to get out of here. So he came across to me. I'm saying that this shotgun's getting mighty heavy. And I said, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you guys want. I said, right now, your ass is mine. And I negotiated with him saying, we have non-combatants in here. Americans, your people, my people, Pakistanis, Filipinos, all kinds of people. They have nothing to do with this. I said, I'll make you a deal. I said, those people go free. You let them walk out the back gate to the service, where they entered in, to the kitchen and service. And you let them enter out, and they go by, they go free. And I said, you can have me, my Marines, our equipment, and everything. I said, no more of your people die, no more of our people die, per se, hopefully. And I said, and the non-combatants, get to go out. I knew when I had taken breakfast earlier that day, 2 of the Americans were secret squirrels. One was definitely CIA. I think the other was NSA. One was a female, but you can never tell anybody like that. And I knew that if these guys got their hands on them and found out who they were, bad medicine right there. So I was pretty much first line duty is make sure that people like that don't fall into enemy hands. So I said, and I remember him distinctly. God, Nathan, for 46 years I remember him, and he just is in his accent. He's saying, and what if I don't agree to their terms? I think I'll blow your fucking head off. I said, you better make a quick, sound decision, because this shotgun's getting mighty heavy. And he wasn't 10 feet away. I could close my eyes and I couldn't miss a guy, right? So basically, he called one of his other guys over, which to my astonishment, he walks back over and they start talking. Now I got 2 of them in my sights. I said, this is great. It's called BOGO, blast one, get one.
Yeah.
And so they talk in Farsi or whatever, and negotiations go down. And he says, okay. I said, now here's the way it's going to go. I called Henry over and Corporal Lochek, and I said, you go upstairs. I said, you get over top of the door, the transfer over the door, looking down at the doors that they just busted in or had just blown in. I said, "Hey, go get the Americans." And one by one, I said, they're gonna walk out. You can check them, you can frisk them for whatever you want. I said, but you hurt one American, you fondle one female, and that Marine's gonna, you shoot them in the face, shoot them dead in the face. He goes, "Got it, Sarge." So he was up there, and that's the way it went.
Mhm.
And one by one, they went out, and then as soon as they got out that gate, they took off and they ran. So it took about 5 minutes, let them get out and get away. And I said, "Okay, now it's just the three of us in there, supposedly."
Did you wanna go into that part?
Yeah,
I was thinking, we could leave some of that if listeners want to read the book. This is where you kinda get into the details of
yeah.
what exactly happens to you and how you get taken prisoner. I did wanna talk just with a few minutes that we do have left about your time after, just some of the PTSD and some of the things that you've dealt with.
Oh man, yeah. So it's I'll work on that for you, Nathan. Is
Yeah.
that with the negotiations that fall apart, that come through there, that when they come in, we open the doors, they come in, and in the book you'll read about the torture, the beatings, and what happened with the other Marines and myself, and that how I got shot, and basically they'd taken, he came in, we had taken all our gear and everything, busted it up, made it useless, the radio antennas, the shotguns, everything, and just threw it in a pile. So when he came in, basically it was a surrender. Well, we paid dearly for that one,
Mm.
and that's how I got shot at point blank range, and it opened me up. I mean, it's horrible. And then next thing I know is that I was unconscious and being drug out of the building. I wake up in a hospital per se, and I'm all bandaged up. There's pictures of that in the book. I got plenty of other um, photographs and things, newspaper articles that take pictures of me in the hospital. I'm off the embassy now, and the only Marine that's been taken, that's been shot, the only Marine that's been taken off the compound. The compound has fallen. The flag's pulled down. The ambassador's been taken, hostage. Ambassador William Sullivan, and I didn't know any of this at the time. I'm just wondering when I came to, all the bandages that are around my chest and my stomach and the intravenous in my arms. And I'm trying to talk to somebody in English to, see what happened. Where am I? And it was later that night that, I call them the goon squad came in, the terrorists came in and actually yanked the intravenous out. And they had taken my dog tags. They had taken all my clothes, my uniforms. I mean, I was there with just one of those besides the bandages, just one of those little white gowns where your ass hangs out,
Mhm.
in the back in the hospital. And so they come in and they jerked the IV out. They put me in handcuffs, and I knew right away as soon as they put the blindfold on. You're taught it in survival school. When you get blindfolded, you pretty much know that they're taking you for a ride where you don't want to go. Then they put a hood on top of you. Now that's bad news. Now they put a blindfold on you, so when they're taking you places, they don't want you to see where you're going, so you can't escape and whatever. But when they put a hood on you, that's because they don't want other people to see who you are. Yeah, oh
Wow.
yeah, it definitely disorients you. But they don't want other people to say, yeah, well, if they see you without the hood, they're going to know, yes, we can identify that Marine being taken out.
Yeah.
But when they just see with the hood over top, handcuffs, and your ass hanging out of a gown, nobody that was ever asked or investigation is ever going to find out. So from there, I'm taken over to one of the worst places on the planet, one of the worst prisons known to man. It's called Evin, Evin. If you want to look that up on
Mhm.
your computer or Google that one and see what that was, it was a Savak prison where it was the execution chambers and the torture chambers for under the Shah for the Savak, his special uh, secret squirrel police. So
Yeah.
that's where I ended up being taken in there with my wounds, and where the book picks up and lets you know what goes on, the torture for that week.
So you go to prison there, you tortured, and then there's like a long line of, we'll call them little miracles that kind of happen, that either things don't happen to you that you think are going to, or ultimately secure your release. And this is 2 seconds from death because you had been sentenced to death under Islamic law. Uh, so I highly recommend people go check out the book. It's called "A Marine Endures Hell," and I'll have the links up for this. I want to ask, just kind of as we're coming up to the end of the time here, you know, part of dealing with PTSD and some of the after effects. I don't imagine that's been easy. Now, writing this book, has that really helped with it? Like, so telling the story. I know you've done a ton of podcasts, you've been on shows, you've got the book out. Uh, has that helped with some of it over the years? Like, or is it? It's still, obviously, it seems like it chokes you up when you get into some of the detail. I've seen that on some of the interviews that you've done, but how have you found it now? Like, are there places you can go, services that you can reach out to? You know, what's the support been like for you out there?
Back then in 1979, remember, it's just barely 5 years after Vietnam War. So people were going through post-traumatic stress and they didn't recognize what it was. They saw it back in World War II, but they called
Yeah,
it
the
the
shell
1,000-yard
shock.
stare, and no one wanted to talk about it. Grandpas and everybody. Yeah, it was shock. It's shell shock. Yeah, they had no, but medically, um, analytically, they didn't know what the heck it was. So when we're wondering what has ever happened to people that has to go through things like that, well, how does it change you? It changes each person differently. Some things are consistent, some things are not. Some are unique. And one was with me is that I can never be controlled again. I mean, once being tortured and being sentenced to death and coming within minutes of being executed, it's something that you come to terms with you're told that we found you guilty in an Islamic court. You're going to be executed in the morning, and you got that whole night to sit there in your cell and just think about it. And then when you get miraculous, is what you're saying, is that even in that book, I said this is a book of miracles. I said there's at least 6 or 7 things that have to go my way at that exact moment in time, or any one of them that doesn't line up, and they're not just happenstance or coincidences. These were
Hmm.
absolute miracles from anybody's point of view, any religious. These things are out off the chart from the cosmos outside our universe. I'm telling you. And if you read the book and you think that you contact me, my name and number can be, you'll be free to give that out. And if you read that book, you'll say, yes, how about this, Ken? How about that? And a couple people already have done that since I've written that book. And said, would you consider this a miracle too? I said, yeah, let me think about that. Why at point blank range was I almost cut in half, and a medical miracle, I'm still walking, things like that. So that gives you an idea. But when it comes to post-traumatic stress, what bothered me, and I stayed in the Marine Corps until my tour of duty was up in 1982, and coming home with the accolades and everything for what I did, and the Purple Heart and the medals that were bestowed. I was just doing my job and duty, just like anybody else that went over to in the Marine Corps or in Vietnam in any of the services. They sacrificed just as much as I had done. And things that you go through that make changes. I'm 22 years old, Nathan. I mean, I was a young man, a kid, basically. You're going through this. That stuff is going to bother you and affect you as you continue to grow in life. Physically and mentally, spiritually, whatever you're going to go through in life. And what I found was the things that hurt most is that no one was ever going to tell me and control me again unless I let it. Okay, and that goes from the torture all the way through up into when I get out of the Marine Corps. Now I'm looking for a place to go and a job to do, and I don't mind for the most part. When I was looking for other jobs, I was married at the time. Is that there's different ways to try to control people, and once you feel it or you have that fear that someone's in charge of you, you push back against it.
Yeah.
And it's not that I didn't like authority. It's just it had to be on my terms. Everything had to be on my terms. For instance, I couldn't stand when I thought about getting into law enforcement. Well, when I first got out, I was in the best shape of my life. And, I went to work for the Department of Energy as a DOE courier. We transport the nukes. You want to know how you get nuclear weapons and nuclear material all around the United States? We escorted. So they wanted badasses. They wanted people that were ex-psychos and Green Berets and guys that had military training, that they could count on, that are willing to do whatever it takes to keep from special nuclear material getting in the hands of unauthorized terrorists or whatever. And that was great. I don't mind going by their rules. Same thing again is once I got through that and I joined a police department. Uniforms and regulations and laws. As long as I
Okay.
said, yes, I take an oath, I will wear your uniform the way it's supposed to be. I will do it myself at my time. I will do whatever the chief says. I'm not going to argue with anybody. But when it comes to a relationship or friendships, being a civilian or personal life, I don't like to be manipulated. And if I feel I'm being manipulated, I fight back. And I've been married and divorced 3 times, and I didn't at the time. I didn't really want to. At times where in the last 30 years or so, we didn't have a lot back and forth in politics in the United States until Iran again keeps coming up and popping up, in the news. And now you have the advent of instant news and Google and the internet, where you can see it almost live time. You're looking at it, and people would go back and say, "Hey, remember the hostages back in November with Jim? Whatever happened with Jimmy Carter and the hostages?" Every once in a while, they have one on, or there was a book or something, a movie about one of them. You get the one where the book was written by Antonio Mendez, who was actually a CIA operative that went in to get the other hostages out in the movie Arco with Ben Affleck. See. And I was a technical advisor on that later. So it never goes away. And when you're seeing things like Hezbollah and Hamas, people say, "What are these?" Well, I can tell you what they are. And we could, back from 1979, and going on TV talk shows and podcasts and things like that. And when podcasts come up, people say, "You ever think about writing a book?" I said, "What am I going to tell about everything?" They said, "No, sit down. Every time you have a flashback, every time you have a thought process or something comes up, and a smell or something. Smell is very, very. I'm telling you, Nathan, the smell of curry and certain spices. I mean, that brings me right back to the restaurant, right back to Iran in a heartbeat. So with things like this, they're what I call demons that I had locked away in a closet, and I didn't think they were bothering me, but they did. They had a profound effect on me, is that they dictated what I couldn't do or what I could do, back and forth. And when the hard part was to sit down and talk with people and the memories of what went on, how to actually write it. So I had a lot of help and a lot of friends, and that's kind of like letting those demons back out of the closet, but you have to control them, you know. And when I say demons, I mean it's a lot of hatred. It's a lot of anxiety. You see people in chadors, you see Muslims from other countries, and you shy away from them. You don't want to talk to them, and it profoundly affected people. And it's not anything, just a drug. There's no drug that you could take. I mean, there's not a pain. It's just an anguish of things that they're like little demons that control you to make you think or feel a certain way. And they're triggers is the best thing I can say. And sitting and talking with other vets that have gone through it, and not just veterans, but people that have been victims, sexual assaults, or people that have been through horrendous car crashes or airplanes. There was one in our group that had been in an airplane crash, and he came to, as the only one with bodies, pieces of them, people all over the place, half of people still stuck in a seat, things like that. And, you figure, you start to get a little spiritually wound up, and you start to looking deep inside, and you say, if I had died, where would I have gone? What would have happened to me, spiritually, with a religious point of view. And you can never rule that out, no matter what your personal feelings are, or what religion you want to take up. But never rule that out. Try them all. Whatever your background was when you were a kid, go back to that. Or if you want to, try something new in the future, I'd give advice to try to, look at Christianity, look at Judaism, look at whatever you want that makes you feel good, and that helps you with these torments and these temptations at times to just be anything but normal, And it's scary.
I think that's good advice. I think that's a good place to wrap it there. We're gonna have to have you back on, because I do want to get into like your career after this. You still did stuff for 20 years. I don't know how you managed to do policing after that, especially with what I know about policing. I feel like it would drive me even crazier. You know what? I want to say thank you though for going, obviously the service, but being willing to put the story out. That stuff really does help other people. I imagine it helped you, and being able to go out and tell your story. So, thank you for doing that. There's the website for you. So I want to give you a second here, just say where people can find you. So you have your website, kenkraus.com, and that's KENKRAUS.com. You can read up a little bit more about you. Anywhere else that you want people to find you or find the book?
No, it's the best place. I mean, it's on Amazon. It's print on demand. You can go to Amazon and put my name in or put the name of the book in, and it'll pop up. Or, like I said, kenkraus.com. It takes you right to the website there at Amazon. There's 3 editions. There's a soft book. Actually, there's 4. You had the Kindle version, I think, but there's a soft cover. Identically as there's a hardcover, because some people just like the hardcover, so there's no difference there. And then there's the special edition, which did more research. And as I was writing the book, we came across a lot of photographs. We had to do a lot of research on the photographs to make sure we get the rights to it, and they're allowed, and verify a lot of things, plus things that I learned since then that I didn't know back then. For instance, in the book, you find it interesting, long story short, of actually who negotiated and what the negotiations were to get the hostages home, and why they let them get taken to begin with, and all the protocols when they come back.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's a lot of secret squirrel stuff in there. And you'll say, there's no way that would have happened. I said, it's a way, buddy. And it's all proven. No one can discount it. So, and if I embarrass people when it happened, I'm sorry, but sometimes the truth just has to come out.
I
no matter
agree.
how much
That's
it
why
hurts.
we got the podcast here. We like putting out these stories and really appreciate having the opportunity to speak with people such as yourself. So I want to say thank you for being on here today. Need everybody to go check out the book, get the special edition, and learn as much as you can from these. Hang on the line for 2 seconds. We'll say bye offline, but appreciate it.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there, so pass it along. Thanks again.